Hello, everyone. Welcome to Close Corners. I'm your host, Tyler, and I'm joined today by my friend Holden. This is episode one of our series of podcast episodes brought to you over the digital waves, where we'd like to talk to you about our musical interests and inspire you to do the same. And, Holden, if you'd like to do a quick introductory spiel about yourself, maybe about your interests, that could be a good place to start.
Yes. Thank you for having me, Tyler.
Yes, of
Uh,
course.
to everyone out there, my name is Holden. Um, I am currently finishing up school here at Temple University. I am a media studies production major, but I'm first and foremost a musician. I tend to have a lot more specialty in experimental music, but I'm overall very much interested in analyzing media and using media as a way to spread a message. So yeah.
It's very beautiful and very succinct. And I would have to agree with that. Just for background on me as well, I am basically the equivalent major. Here at Westchester, it's called Media and Culture. But uh, Holden and I have been friends for a very long time, since middle school even. And
That's
we
very
both found
true.
ourselves coalescing towards a similar, you know, kind of wheelhouse. We both can definitely appreciate
Similar
media.
path.
A similar path, yes. While I'm not quite the musician that Holden is, we both do have a great appreciation for music, I would say.
Mhm.
So I think where we'd like to start today, what we'd like to kick everything off with, as it were, is a discussion of the musical genre known as Vaporwave. Um, this is something, we're both kind of versed in. And for the greater themes of the show about maybe bringing you some stuff you've never heard of before, I feel like Vaporwave is a very accessible uh, kind of meeting point of not only an interesting musical idea, but also an interesting idea in a wider cultural sense as well. And I feel like it's worth analyzing in that.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I would also say it's funny because at the same time it can be accessible but also like not accessible. Like oddly enough, I feel like where you and I like crossed in music was at Vaporwave. Um and so which a lot of like Vaporwave tends to be like pretty experimental in its nature, but also I feel was like a very defining genre for like like for like the 2010s,
Hmm.
despite being relatively like niche. Um, but it otherwise like had like I think it told like a huge story of of like just like how postmodernism is, and especially late stage capitalism,
Hmm.
reflected like post 9/11, and using like these pre-existing 80s and 90s samples, and not necessarily um entirely 80s and 90s, but a lot of these samples that can kind of relate a bit to like consumer culture, or at least turning those samples into that. A lot of those samples may be like from like old pop songs or from like TV commercials, you name it. But
Hmm.
I think really what Vaporwave is just kind of like another genre that otherwise takes pre-existing sounds and recontextualizes them into a bigger, into a different picture to make a new aesthetic, which I feel like has always existed in music for a very long time, ever since like sampling has existed. But I think what makes Vaporwave so interesting and also unique in its approach is because of the globalization of it. It's basically like the first genre to be like globalized, because like it didn't originate from like a specific location. It originated from the internet, and like the internet is basically everywhere. It's anywhere.
Right.
And furthermore, it's also like the accessibility that people can have to making vaporwave. It's less about the what like you can technically do, but more so that you can take these, take things that already like exist before as material and then like reshape them to create something new. And I think it's kind of beautiful because that's some music like that, like with that DIY ethos that, can go all the way back to like, punk, um, is something that like gives like power to like to the creator, that like it really shows that like anyone is capable of making music, and furthermore making like a whole atmosphere, a whole vibe. Yeah.
For sure. I think that one of the strengths of vaporwave, and we never really gave an airtight definition. You kind of went into the definition, but I think for those who are not familiar, let's give a concrete definition. I went on Wikipedia real quick and I pulled it up. So basically, the way that the great minds over at Wikipedia describe it is that vaporwave is a microgenre of electronic music. It's a subgenre of hauntology, and it's also a visual art style at the same time. And what's really interesting about it is its origin as a music genre and like an art movement, more of as a meme. Like in the early 2010s, like Holden had mentioned. Initially, like many great things on the internet, it just started as a joke, but it really has evolved into its own, style. It's evolved into maybe even transcending music into an ethos, so to say. The way that we are able to reappropriate the aesthetics of the past and reapply them to a modern context is kind of the crux behind it all. It's kind of the backbone. And there
Yeah,
are
that
still
was the one thing I definitely forgot to mention, so thank you for
Mhm.
mentioning that.
For sure. And I think that it is also maybe a bit contentious because there are still people who view it as purely a meme, which I mean, it is. But the fact that something that is was proposed as a joke, but was able through other people's artistic interpretations of the work, able to become really a very strong aesthetic, especially for internet inclined people. It's very recognizable. It's definitely earned its stripes in that way, and that's yeah. I just think it's very interesting. I started listening to vaporwave back around that 2010s era. I didn't really know what it was at the time. Music at that time was not one of my passions. I hadn't really latched onto it into that way to where I would consider anything cultural or musical about it, but I definitely liked the sound. There was definitely something very ethereal and beautiful to it. And the use of samples in the way that vaporwave does to recontextualize something you've heard before, or even make you think you've heard something before when you really haven't, I think is
Right.
definitely a hallmark and a very cool part of the sound. And I
No,
think that's
no pun
definitely an appeal.
intended.
Yeah, no pun intended, as it were. Oh,
But
yeah.
no, yeah, I have to very much agree with that. I think it's also important to mention like, um, I think what vaporwave tends to be known as now is it was actually not really what like it was it was in the beginning
Hmm.
entirely. So like, the first piece of what people would call vaporwave originated from one of Trix Point Never, who's another who goes by oh boy, um, Daniel Lopatin, who goes by the name one of Trix Point Never, had this YouTube channel called Sunset Corp, which he would upload uh, a lot of videos accompanied with music that he had made, and some of that music was one of the first examples of what he would call echo jams. And echo jams, like in more of the later years, have become much more recognized as like a genre and a style that is like of vaporwave but still different.
Hmm.
um Echo Jams tends to be more characterized by the vocals tied into it. It has less of a strict um a strict composition of like 80s and 90s like samples to be kind of like like corporate music, you know?
Hmm.
Like it was more so tailing off of like being chopped and screwed music, which for those who aren't aware of chopped and screwed was um pioneered by southern hip hop um artist DJ Screw,
Hmm.
who would take a lot of like southern hip hop records and make these mixes where he would slow these records down. He would chop them, which was basically like it kind of sounded like the song was like skipping a little bit sometimes.
Hmm.
Um, or and he would also just like play around with many different other kinds of ways of like DJing to create a new atmosphere. Um, and that has translated into like the future of hip hop, but also that very much translated into one of the biggest inspirations for Echo Jams and Vaporwave.
And
So
it's so interesting, I think, just on a side tangent, maybe not a side tangent, but just the thought that, like, because one DJ in the South, like decided to slow down some hip hop tracks, that it gave birth to a whole new genre. I definitely think that speaks to the power of media and of communication, that one of the hallmarks of Chopped and Screwed is a slower tempo and a lower pitch. The way that translates to even like the newest vaporwave releases of today, it's really interesting to observe that lineage.
right, like right, I totally agree with that. Like when you listen to like the first like vaporwave album was a under a name that One and Tricks, like a one-off name that One and Tricks Point never adopted, called Chuck Person, and
Hmm.
the whole album was called Chuck Person Echo Jams Volume One, um, which overall the I really like the name because it kind of alludes to there being like another one to like volume
Right.
one out of like what, but like ever since there's never been like another one. It's just kind of like it's just that it's been the first and only one of that. Um, which really kind of like plays into like the theme of the record or mixtape more so.
Hmm.
The I think it's also really important to say that what makes vaporwave and like Echo Jam such a like a unique genre is how much it relies on visuals for its kind of like for lack of a better term storytelling. Like um if Echo Jams and like the rest of Vaporwave didn't have like the visual, like the album covers to like really set off like the feelings and of the aesthetic of the record, then I feel like it wouldn't play to its name, because really what Vaporwave is it's kind of like a multimedia experience. It's something that you can kind of see and you can hear at the same time.
Hmm.
And so
And I
the
think
Echo Jams.
that's very well reflected in a lot of vaporwave album art. I think that, just to speak on Echo Jams, I think that was definitely the starting point for a lot of the aesthetic choices that vaporwave would make down the line. I mean, just looking at the cover right now,
Right.
the stretched, the kind of bit crushed effect of that. It's definitely meant to conjure some nostalgia for older computing and perhaps even older corporate branding. Um,
Right.
and I think, yeah, it definitely used the word storytelling. I never thought of it like that, but it definitely is storytelling. I think it only further serves to, get to the point of perhaps vaporwave being, would you call it a critique of capitalist society, or would you call it uh like a parody? Is it? I think it's both.
I would go to say that it is both, because in one, so because the thing is that Echo, like Chuck Person's Echo Jams doesn't really entirely follow the same suit of like vaporwave that vaporwave after like Macintosh Plus does, because when
Hmm.
like when One and Tricks Point Never made this mixtape, like it was mostly like just as like a joke, you know.
Hmm.
He was just taking samples from like Kate Bush, Fleetwood Mac,
Hmm.
Michael Jackson, and like Aphrodite's Child, and like slowing them down, playing like, you know, putting them through like different effects,
Hmm.
looping them, and getting these kind of like these little segments that would like repeat on like a line of lyrics that like for example, like the second song Angel just
Hmm.
repeats like, I'm in quotations, I miss you when you're gone, please stay, Angel, please don't go, and it, like,
Right.
loops over and over. And that's just one section of, I believe that's supposed to be from a Fleetwood Mac song. I'm sorry if I don't have
Uh, A2
the
or
yeah,
Angel.
A2,
Yeah,
correct.
A2 is, yeah. I actually have the Who Sampled page pulled up right now. Yeah, it's Only Over You by Fleetwood Mac, which released in
R-
1982.
Right, and that was just one section of that song, which had probably had a different like, you know, had a different like overall feeling, and
Hmm.
also like lyrical content. But when it focuses on this one on this one part on like the on like this like longing, you know, it's a completely different atmosphere.
Right.
Um,
And I think that
I
that's one of the main strengths of sampling is being able to recontextualize the sound. I think if you look at even just the wider world of hip hop sampling or even like dance music, uh, I've seen these videos come up on my feeds on various platforms of basically like sample breakdowns. And there were a couple for one of my favorite albums, which is Daft Punk's Discovery. Um,
oh
just
yeah.
the extent to which samples were manipulated, reversed, chopped, sped up to create a whole new vibe. When you go back and listen to the original pieces, you don't even recognize it, but then that one part that they use jumps out at you. And I've had that experience with Echo Jams as well, going back and listening to some of these tracks or tracks that it sampled, specifically like Toto's Africa, like which is meme to
Oh
death,
yeah,
totally meme to
absolutely.
death. It is actually the opening track on the album as well. It's an edit of Toto's Africa, but I think many people view that as like the pinnacle of 80s music, like the most 80s song. And I think it was actually very genius to start the album or like the mixtape with that, to, pull people in, be like Africa by Toto. But even with all the time that's passed and how many people have interpolated samples from Africa, it's still so unique. There's no other track that really sounds just like the first track of Echo Jams, even though,
Right.
that's been sampled to death.
Right. And I this also made me think of another thing of like just like the sounds that are involved with the samples themselves.
Hmm.
Because obviously like music throughout time is very much tends to be characterized from the different sounds they use, the recording technologies they use, right? Um and I also tend to I like to see I like to see vaporwave as kind of like a new form of acousmatic music, which
Hmm.
acousmatic music was kind of sprung off of like a lot of like classical music, and more specifically um like music concrete, which was
Hmm.
like the pretty much the basis, the beginnings of like sampling and
Hmm.
taking sounds and like using the studio to manipulate them.
Hmm.
So like through acousmatic music, you were taking these sounds and you were kind of removing the sounds from their like, when you hear like a sound, you're like, oh, what does this come from? What made this sound? What
Hmm.
acousmatic does is that it completely destroys that. It's more so you hear the sound and then you kind of make the idea for yourself. So like when you listen to it's like a cinema for your ears, right?
Hmm.
So like when you listen to something like vaporwave and you're not hearing the original sounds, like the original sample, like sounds of the samples, you're hearing
Hmm.
them slowed down. You're getting a completely different sound, and otherwise getting a completely different story.
Hmm.
And through that story, you can't necessarily like tell where those sounds entirely come from,
Right.
but you can't help but feel that they elicit like a nostalgic feeling that isn't found in like the 80s. That's why
Yeah.
I feel like vaporwave very much is characterized by the fact that it feels like something of the past,
Mhm.
yet something of the future.
Right.
That kind of through to go back to your point about like, is it a critique of capitalism? Is it a parody? Like that, I think to that extent, when we like look at a product, like a product is like tends to always be presented to us in this idea of like being the future, you know, like this is the next step in human convenience, evolution, whatever that may be. And
Mhm.
but the future will, what we perceive to be the future will always eventually, you know, become the past.
Yeah.
So and when it becomes the past, we kind of see like the little different gimmicks that um of its time that like, you know, presented itself so futuristic yet is very defining of a period of time.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Definitely. And it is just kind of like how many levels of irony can we get on? And I think that's a wider part of internet culture, but Vaporwave's existence is definitely a defiant act of irony. Even to the point to where um, I don't remember it crystal clear, but Anthony Fantano had really done an interview with Chuck Person on a Tricks Point Never, Daniel Apotin, and he discussed his kind of like standoffishness, maybe not standoffishness, but his disconnection from the genre he created, which is really interesting uh, because, you know, for him it was just a one-off sound experiment project, but the fact it was able to be so inspiring to so many different producers and even just like regular people who became producers through their work in vaporwave. I think yeah, it's definitely remarkable, just how much irony can inspire people to create, and
How much
and
fucking around can inspire people to create?
yeah, yeah,
Like it's kind of like people like vaporwave is just one of those genres where it's like it really is something that you could just fuck around with because it's just,
Mm,
I think it's just fun at the end of the day.
yeah,
And like the fact that like anyone if you have you can really go far with it if you have like an ear for music, you know, and
hmm,
like sound. Like but like whether you but it doesn't matter about like, you know, the technical skill like
hmm,
um so um, yeah, like, but like, I think to add on where like I think there's definitely a point where Daniel Lopatin, One Tricks Point Never, like it was definitely like, yeah, I was not like seeing this like, you know, like I would never like I never thought of this as being like this as like vaporwave or
hmm,
whatever it was. That was so when where vaporwave started to evolve was like at this point vaporwave didn't eat like with when Echo Jams come out, like there wasn't really even like a genre like tied to it. No one really knew what to define it as.
hmm,
And so what was like kind of the next step in vaporwave, though what not really being um inspired in this, not necessarily sounding the same as Echo Jams, but like still was very relative to like these corporate aesthetics and
hmm,
like Muzak and like kind of like retrofuturism was
hmm,
Farside Virtual by James Ferraro, which for anyone who's unfamiliar with James Ferraro, I feel is a very important. If he isn't already, I feel like over time will just become increasingly more important of a figure when it comes to like internet-based music.
hmm,
Because he's got his name more tied with the genre of hypnagogic pop, which with a lot of the music he made um had a lot to do with different things spanning from consumer culture um to masculinity to cybernetics, and a lot of what he would do um, was utilize creative ways of presenting his music through different mediums. So a lot of the, like, for example, a lot of his earlier stuff, ranging from like 2006 to 2011, was very lo-fi, and would which was also very much a defining characteristic when it came to vaporwave. It was very lo-fi and very uh electronic based, as all of his music really is. But the thing was, with James Farrar's music, it felt like he was taking a lot of different pieces and corners of kind of like different areas of like culture in media, or in just like America, and or just like, or the different areas of culture, and um kind of jamming them into these new worlds.
Hmm.
But going fast forward to 2011 with Farside Virtual, um that album was had very much a curated thematics around consumer culture and retrofuturism, um the ever growing um uh the ever growing um what is it, like singularity, like singularity was
Hmm.
like the commentation on singularity, and also like corporate music. So it feels very soulless, it feels very digital, it feels very just like man like not sorry not man-made, actually the opposite of
Like,
man-made. It feels like it was made by a machine,
right.
and that's very much characterized by its MIDI composition, which also, for those who aren't familiar with what making MIDI music is, it's, MIDI allows you to basically put notes and sounds on a grid that is otherwise like perfect. You can have, just like a human, when you play drums, you're not going to always be perfectly on time, because, humans are
Hmm.
flawed like that. But machines, can be perfectly on time to the second. So, um, James um, really played into that sound and the characterization for this record. So he uses
Hmm.
a lot of different stock sound effects, and also sounds from different things that we hear in our everyday life, like a uh ring like ringtones, and
Yeah.
like text to speech. But at the same time, like it sounds so dated, but
Hmm.
like in a perfect way. Like it makes itself seem so futuristic. And James characterized the album as being like a still life,
Hmm.
so it feels like something very defining for like 2011, like that, it sounds like it would be very futuristic, but it feels like so dated at the same time. But like I think that's just kind of like what is really like that is like very much the beauty of it. And I feel
Hmm.
like um tying that into just like those like corporate aesthetics is very much what would lead into what would be the next record in the vaporwave canon to really define the genre, which is Macintosh Plus's Floral Shop, which
Yes. Yes.
um I would like to hand that off to you to talk a bit about, because I think
Yes.
that record holds very closely to you.
I do have a very close relationship with that album. It was definitely one of the first moments I observed music as being something more than just sound. I was still pretty young at the time, but I just remember hearing it and thinking there was something, maybe more going on. Like, what is this maybe trying to say? So I do credit that album a lot with maybe like my musical development and my grander understanding of theme. Um, But no, it definitely is a hallmark release. Maybe not even just in vaporwave, but as a post-internet music, like music in a post-internet world, even stands. I think, the its influence, can't go understated. And I think even if you didn't know what you were looking at, if you used a computer for any amount of time, you've definitely come across it and maybe just not known what it was. But it definitely follows in the lineage of Echo Jams in a big way. I would, I don't know. It's not trying to be Echo Jams Volume 2 or anything. It definitely goes its own way with the sounds, but it uses samples in a similar way. Um, but I think a lot of parts of Echo Jams are more, maybe more robotic or discordant. And I had forgotten. I'm listening to it right now, actually. There's kind of like a harsh noise bit right in the middle. Like it's definitely a very experimental project compared to what Macintosh Plus would become, where it was more of a refinement of the sound in a very interesting way, while it still held
Right.
to those roots of criticizing, you know, culture through memes.
Mhm.
Right. And yeah, yeah, great album. Great album. Did you have anything you
Yeah,
wanted to say about it?
yeah, I have a lot to say about the record. Because a lot of people, feel like when it comes to, like, because vaporwave itself is still like a genre that's still being understood
Right.
by a lot of music circles. But it has honestly gotten better like has become much more understood over time. Now that like the first vaporwave album basically came out like close to almost like 15 years ago, you know? So.
Right.
Um, but Macintosh Plus was the one that was like so defining to the idea and term vaporwave because it basically was very much inspired by Echo Jams,
Hmm.
and it was also inspired by the aesthetics of Farside Virtual by James Ferraro, and it kind of like merged the two, where it was kind of using the same chopped and screwed techniques um to otherwise take segments of songs and present an otherwise glossy futuristic sound but is still like so reflective of the past.
Hmm.
um but this the visual aesthetic, like with the covered, like with like what's the bust, what is it
I
called?
believe it's this. I think it's David, the statue of David. I can fact check that real quick.
Yeah, the Statue of David, like with like
Yeah, it is.
the a very fruity pink background,
Hmm.
with a black and pink checkerboard at the under it, and in the background an image of the Twin Towers, um,
Oh, I
which
never
I never
realized
even
what
real
that really. I gotta
yeah,
look at that.
I didn't realize that later down the line, but I think it's so important to like the idea of vaporwave because it is very much reflective of just like post 9/11 culture.
Yeah.
But like I think if anyone were to look up vaporwave now and like find a song that would define it, um it would be the song Lisa Frank 420
Hmm.
by Macintosh Plus, which took um a a it is the art is the original artist Lisa Frank, right? Yeah.
I'm actually not familiar with that sample lineage. I can look it up real quick. Macintosh Plus Who sample.
Please do.
Let's see. And you were talking about the track. Oh wait, these are all in Japanese. Oops. Um, let's
Yeah.
see. Lisa. I gotta translate the page. See, this is also, part of the wonderful journey of exploring vaporwave. Half of it is in Japanese. You get to learn a little Japanese along the way, and it's actually interesting. I've never thought. Why is why do you think Japanese, like just even writing, or Japanese aesthetics? Why do you think that plays so closely into vaporwave? I.
Oh, I actually do have something for that.
Mhm.
So what I really see vaporwave being, it's like it's lounge music, right?
Hmm. Oh,
And
and
lounge
to the other
lo-
point, yes, Lisa Frank 420 is the song that samples "It's Your Move" by Diana Ross, uh,
Diana Ross, thank
which
you.
I
That's what I
think
was looking for.
that definitely is the most quintessential vaporwave track ever. I think
Yes.
it's a perfect distillation of everything it is.
To finish off what I was
Yes,
saying
please.
previously before I get into the next. Um yeah, so the song um Lisa Frank 420, which is a sample of Diana Ross's "It's Your Move," which was not even like a, I don't even think it was like a top of, like, I don't even think it was like an album cut. I think it was like a B-side, right?
Hmm.
Um um but like basically it would, the song um took this sample and basically took out all these different parts of it, but left like, made the lyrics almost feel like they were talking about like consumer culture,
Hmm.
like talking about was it the lyric is like, I'm giving up on trying to sell you things that you ain't
Yeah,
buying.
yeah,
Like originally the song is like a, it's kind of, I think it's like a like kind of like a breakup song,
yes.
but like this song becomes recontextualized into like a very like consumer centric song. Um and it does, it's I think it's very fantastic. In how it can take the song out of context and just make it more so
Mhm.
like, just more so like consumer oriented, to which is very much like the combining of like the 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 aesthetics that came from Echo Jams and also Farside Virtual from James Ferraro.
Mhm.
um Going further to what you were talking about with uh Japanese characters in vaporwave and whatnot,
Mhm.
is I think has a lot to do with exoticism.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh, yes, that makes sense. Yeah.
so like vaporwave, I feel like if there's another term that I would give it, it's like lounge punk, you know, because I think for being like a what I would really say a critique of like capitalism.
Mhm.
um like it feels like, it feels very much like it feels like lounge music. That's why it sits between being experimental and like accessible at the same time.
Yeah.
That it kind of feels, it feels like easy listening. It's supposed like Macintosh Plus Floor Shop especially is supposed to, and even to go further to like Farside Virtual by James Ferraro, is
Mhm.
they kind of supposed to feel like easy listening. Like they're kind of like, you know, happy tones. They feel
Mhm.
like, you know, something that would play in like in like an elevator or like
Okay.
an office or
And
some sort.
yeah,
Um yeah,
I think there is
you
like
want to say
the lounge element, but I think it's also at the same time, and it can vary track to track, but there's also like a layer of sinister intent almost when it comes through. I think the way it's often degraded and just kind of like the aesthetic context behind it, it feels almost scary in some contexts. And I think that ties to
I do agree.
like my ultimate like view of vaporwave as a genre, which is uh like a destroyed or like a promised future that never arrived almost. I think those two ideas definitely go hand in hand. Actually, it's funny when I tried to introduce my dad to vaporwave. One of his first thoughts, without even really thinking about it, was like, "Man, we really sold the farm for you guys," because he grew up in the '80s, which is compared to, the economic conditions of my lifetime was like the golden age, and especially in America. Um, but his
Hmm.
ability to pick up the fact that, you know, this all was promised to us, but we didn't get any of it. I think it really speaks to the aesthetic power of vaporwave to get that point across so effortlessly to someone who,
Yeah.
is not a musical uh, person really whatsoever. Um, I think that's really great. I think it's really cool.
Right.
Hmm.
Makes me think of like when I was like playing when I would show like my I think there's like one time I was like showing like my parents like something from like Far Side Virtual or like a Floral Shop, and they're
Hmm.
like they were like this feels like background music, and I'm like
Right.
yeah, absolutely, that's totally, I feel like that's like totally what's trying to encapsulate.
Hmm.
But going back on why there's tends to be a lot of use of like these like Japanese characters. One of the things in Vaporwave that like um post Macintosh Plus was that there tends to be a lot of use of Japanese characters when it comes to titling the songs. Like a lot of when you look at a lot of the songs on Macintosh Plus Photoshop, a lot of the characters are in Japanese, and it kind of blurs the lines of like where is this actually from? Who's the creator of this?
Hmm.
Is this creator actually Japanese or someone from America?
Right.
Which I think at this point we know that the mastermind behind Macintosh Plus, the Vectroid, is from America.
Hmm.
Um, but it just points it rather points to the globalization of vaporwave as a genre. But
Hmm.
part of one of the things that makes me think about like the use of these of like Japanese characters, um, or I guess like foreign characters to like America in a way or wherever it may be,
Hmm.
um, is because of how much vaporwave is like sounds like lounge music, and lounge music goes kind of far back to like exotica, which exotica as a genre was basically made in reaction to Hawaii becoming the like the 50th
Oh, really?
50th state of, yeah, the 50th state of America. So all of these like, white business, or not white business, but like like kind of like it's kind of like it was basically the appropriation of like these kind of like indigenous sounds
Hmm.
for like uh, for like background music, so to say.
Right.
So and it's like if you listen to like a lounge or an exotica artist, especially like Martin Denny, um it feels like something that would play in the background at some like vacation, like tropical Hawaii, you know sort of environment. Yet it
Hmm.
was very much being like an appropriation of those things, which over time has influenced many different areas of music, because people were very much inspired by the fact that it was an appropriation and almost of itself really being like
Oh,
like just funny, it was just
right.
just funny, and like so I feel like this whole idea of like, especially in a globalized setting, this like um this this whole thought about like exoticism really plays into vaporwave in one way or another, where it's kind of like you're when like it's like these places that like feel like you're kind of being put in a place that feels familiar but like never experienced before. Like it
Hmm.
feels like a otherwise new world, somewhere that's like kind of like foreign.
Hmm.
Um, but like and I think it goes deeper to how, corporate music tends to be very much like an appropriation of you know music before it. And I feel like really what vaporwave is at the end of the day tends to be uh appropriating corporate music.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
it's like a like appropriation in a way.
Yeah, that comes
It's
back to like layers of irony and like how many times can we make the same joke? But then
yeah.
like it's not like corporate America
And
doesn't deserve it. Like at the same time, like yeah, it's a worthy
it's, and
critique.
also I think on top of that, not only how much of like how much like the layers of irony, but and like how much we can make the same joke, but also uh how far the joke can get away from its original meaning, you
That
know?
too, that too. And yeah, I think that has to do with layers of irony and like meme culture definitely is just how separated we are from the original context. Like I had no personal idea about like any of the Exodia or the Japanese art movement. My initial explanation for why that Japanese might have been appropriated was because it just kind of like looks cool, or
Right.
or that the especially technology sectors in the 80s and 90s were largely based in Japan. So I could see the lineage of technology from that era
Right.
inspiring that.
Especially how like capitalism is plays in Japanese culture as
Mhm.
well too. Because I think like next if we're thinking about like technological capitalist giants, you're either thinking of America or Japan. So
Right.
it's either of the two, you
Mhm.
know.
That
Um
makes sense. Mhm.
but yeah, I think that's good to stop there.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. Let me think of something charming to say. Yeah. Well, thank you for listening. If indeed you still are. We've been Tyler and Holden, and we hope that you have enjoyed talking about Vaporwave with us. I would say that the main things you should check out, if anything we've talked about has interested you, definitely check out the work of Chuck Person. Definitely Echo Jams, YouTube, Google, you'll find it. Same thing with Macintosh Plus. Definitely check out James Ferraro too. Um, yeah.
Yep,
And
absolutely. And I
any
feel like
closing
that was
thoughts?
yeah, I feel like if for anyone that is ever trying to get into vaporwave, there's three records: Chuck Person, Echo James Volume 1, um, from 2010, James Ferraro, Farside Virtual from 2011, and Macintosh plus Floral Shop, also from 2011, are great starting points to otherwise get into the world of vaporwave and the aesthetics that relate to it. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Well, this has been us. We'll be back around next week sometime, hitting you with
Yeah.
related topics or maybe something completely different. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But thank you.
Yes.
Bye.
And thank you so much. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye.